library athlete builder, and it's Purdue week this week, thank goodness. This week we have Caleb Corey and Ian Urchel. Did I say that right, Ian?
Yep, that's correct.
They are both working with Purdue's crew team. That's rowing. So Caleb is one of the coaches. He's the head freshman coach. And Ian rows for the school. And I say it's Purdue week because Purdue starts today. I know this episode doesn't drop August 19th, the day that we're recording, but my son Sam also started up at Purdue today. So we dropped him off last week for Boiler Gold Rush. And we've had a number of Ball State alums on the show, All-Americans, coaches, NFL guys, throwers, etc., boxers even. I only had a couple Purdue guys, Brandon Smitley, who runs Thirst down in Terre Haute, and then my man Dan Brown with Lift Lab. So getting back to Purdue is great because selfishly I'm a two-time Purdue grad, so everybody talk a lot slower for me if you don't mind. But today we have Caleb Corey and Ian Urchel. Let's talk about these guys a little bit. So when I looked up Purdue crew team or the rowing team, and I just learned, I knew that there's a difference between varsity and club sports, and for Purdue, this is considered a club sport. What I didn't know was that last year, about as high as any club sport can go, they have their own versions of national championships, and they basically won. They ran the table and won everything. The Southern Intercollegiate Rowing Association, they won that. They won the American Collegiate Rowing Association, they won that. They had first team All-Americans, Matt Scubas and Kara Benbow, second team James Murrer and Nicolette Hallahan, and Brianna Ruggiero, I'm going to say. Freshman All-American Jack Miller, and then Regan Bethard and I want to say Pawani Surthy. So the team has been growing, the team's been improving, and they basically won everything. Also like Coach of the Year with Nathan Walker. So today we have Caleb on, and I met Ian at my gym over at Unbreakable Athletics early this summer. He was, he and his girlfriend were there, so I saw him walking in, and he had a crew team, a crew shirt on, and it said, I think Bucknell. And so I simply asked, hey, do you row for Bucknell? And he's like, no, not exactly. So I'm like, what the hell, dude? He goes, funny story. Basically, when you are at these championships and when you beat the other team, they switch shirts. Is that right, Ian?
You take their shirt. You don't give yours.
Okay, so you just take theirs and they go home, naked, and you still get to keep yours. So that's how the conversation started. And I'm like, well, let's talk about that and that sport alone, because like anything, to compete at a high level takes a lot more. Like Nike's new slogan, not everybody's made to be champions. And so he got me in contact with Caleb, and so here we are on the show. Welcome to the show, Caleb and Ian. So glad to have you guys here today in Purdue Week.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Excited
Thanks
to be
for having
on.
us. Me too. Really excited.
For sure. Caleb, let's just start with you since you're the older and you're the coach and all. Let's talk about your history a little bit. I know you rowed for Purdue and then went to IUPUI. Just talk about your chronology of how you progressed as an athlete and now coach.
Yeah. So growing up, I played all the typical sports that you do as like an elementary schooler, middle schooler. I played baseball, soccer, even dabbled a little bit with football, and I did that all throughout, high school. In high school, actually, I did marching band, so it gave me a pretty big, lung capacity, which was great because I didn't even know about the sport of rowing until I came to Purdue. But similar to Ian, Purdue has a freshman orientation week, and some of the guys in my BGR group, which is Boiler Gold Rush, they said, oh, we're going to go to the Purdue call-out, or a Purdue rowing call-out. And I said, rowing, like, in the Olympics? So I went down with them, saw the boathouse, much like Ian did last year. Mm-hmm. And I was just amazed at the fact that this is a pretty big boathouse. It's a pretty big team. There's a lot of money invested in the sport, and you can just walk onto it. And so I decided to give rowing a shot. So my freshman year, I was in the lightweight 8. We ended up, at that time, our national championship was the Dad Vale Regatta. That was like our season ender. The ACRA regatta that, Ian won at, it was still kind of in the formations because there's a history behind, there's a culture behind rowing championships that I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later. But I ended up getting third place, just edging out Michigan by 1 second and losing to Mercyhurst, and I think it was Delaware as well. And so after 1 year of doing that, it became a very big backbone in my work ethic and my student life at Purdue. Just having a mission, having a goal to continue to strive for each year was a big part of my student life. And I met a lot of the friends that I still talk to today, even through rowing. But then after that, when I graduated in 2016, tried to stay away from rowing for a little bit, tried to do some of the stuff around Indy, so CCA sports, some off the wall soccer. But it was a mixed bag. Trying to get a team together and do that, you have half the people on the team that are there to be competitive. The other half are there just for their friends. So when you lose by 3 goals and you see half the team celebrating, half the team kind of moping around, you kind of want to find an environment that replicates a little bit of what you had in college. So that's when I jumped over, saw that IUPUI had a team, volunteered to assistant coach, and after a couple of years of assistant coaching, the head coach left, and that was a different challenge. That was taking 5 athletes who knew nothing about the team and then gradually trying to build the program. So when I started out in 2016, there were 5 athletes, and we just fielded a lightweight novice 4. And then in 2019, that's when the program was at its biggest, and that's when I was the head coach. But I was stressed beyond my mind. But we had about 45 athletes. Then COVID hit, and unfortunately, with a lot of programs across the United States, IUPUI kind of lost a lot of retention. They lost, I guess, their bearings a little bit. And they had to because, the entire world shut down for a year and a half, 2 years. So when that happened, I started to reach out. I was getting a little bit bored of Indy, applied to Northwestern, MSU. And I asked my old head coach, Dave Cusick, who's a legend in the rowing community, I'm applying for the MSU job. Can you back me up on a letter of recommendation? And he didn't message me back for about 4 hours. And then I get a call from Nate Walker, who you just mentioned won Coach of the Year this year. And he said, "Oh, I heard you're interested in novice rowing. We'd love to have you as a coach. You wanted to schedule some time to talk." And that was in 22, I believe, right when rowing started coming back. And then after that, I've been the head freshman men's coach here at Purdue for about 3 years, just continually growing.
It's a nice story. And it's interesting that I played club racquetball at Purdue for a number of years. And you're right, there's some that show up and they're trying to get better and trying to compete and win, and some are not so much. And when it's a varsity sport, the ones that are not so much, they're weeded out like day one, right? But it's a little different, right? And then people are always climbing the ladder because some will go from a club sport and then transfer somewhere else and then further their career in their craft, in their sport somewhere else, and then keep advancing and advancing and advancing. So, Ian, did you row at all in school? Because some schools have it. My high school in Cleveland, St. Ignatius, has it. And did you do that at all in high school or no? Or did you just walk on as well?
I had 0 rowing experience walking into Purdue.
Gotcha. So just straight up numbers wise, are you simply a coach looking for height and pain threshold? This is from the amateur. That's what it looks like to me. I'm not sure. Tell me more about what you guys are looking for in terms of athletes.
So a lot of when we're recruiting athletes, so there's recruitment that goes on where you're talking to high school athletes that are interested in going to Purdue. And they always ask, do I need to be below a certain 2K time? And a 2K test is a 2,000 meter test. It's a test that's based off of spring racing. And, for a lot of the rowing world, that is kind of what measures your worth a little bit. But with a lot of other, varsity sports, probably, I don't know of any other club that really does it. A lot of them use the 2K test as kind of a cutoff factor. So if you're above this time, if you're slower than this time, you're off the team. I go more based off of work ethic because at Purdue it's it's very unique in the circumstance. So we have a varsity women's team, a novice women's team, a varsity men's team, a novice men's team. We have 4 coaches, on salary. We have 4 assistant coaches, and that's just for a club. Our counterpart on the men's side would be Michigan, and Michigan's women's team is a varsity sport, but their men's team is a club as well. But they are also pretty big in depth. They're also probably just as equally funded. So we are kind of unique in the aspect that we recruit every athlete that walks on campus. And the keyword to that is, athlete. People, when they choose Purdue, so Ian, you had a strong background in wrestling, if I remember right.
Yeah, I have a long history of wrestling and football.
Right. So when I'm talking to recruits like Ian, I look at him and I say, oh, he did wrestling, he did football, big dude, probably puts down a lot of watts on the rower, but he might not be well suited for the endurance part, because in rowing, the season, people always ask, oh, is it a rowing season yet? It's similar to track and field, where in the fall, you're trying to build up an aerobic base. In the winter, that's when you do a lot more specific training. And in the springtime, that's your competition season. So you go from your fall season, where we go to races, like we go to Milwaukee, Rockford, Illinois. We host a race at Eagle Creek called Head of the Bald Eagle. And those are 5,000 meters, 6,000 meters. That is more of your cross-country season. And in the springtime, that's where we're doing 2,000-meter sprints. So athlete-wise, Ian was a really solid athlete in terms of just raw watts, and I could see the potential in him for just, quick 2,000 meters, pain threshold right there. But the athletes who really shine in the fall are people who did cross country, people who did swimming, people who, built up an aerobic base. Maybe they did marching band and they have a huge lung capacity already. So there's really no telling who's going to be the perfect athlete apart from what work ethic they display. We had a kid on the team last year, Carter J. He is, I think, 5'11", but he was an aerobic king. And in the rowing world, how we kind of go about, getting different metrics, we use, not only do we use like a raw 5K time, but we do like a weight adjusted. Because when you're sitting in the boat, somebody who weighs 160 pounds displaces less water than that of somebody who weighs 200 pounds, 230, 220. So Ian might be throwing down some sick numbers, but he's also a little bit heavier than somebody else, that weighs 160. So that weight adjusted formula kind of corrects that a little bit in a hypothetical world. And, if Ian pulls a 6'11" on the erg for a 2K, but then you have somebody who's a lightweight and pulls like a 630, that weight adjusted score is going to help equal out the playing field and replicate. If we were just putting Ian in a boat and Carter in a boat and setting them head to head, maybe Carter ends up kicking Ian's ass, So to kind of compound on that, Purdue has the advantage of being a Big Ten campus. And a lot of people choose Purdue not only for the engineering program, but because of things that their parents said of like, you want to go to the home football games, you want to go to the basketball games. Purdue basketball was amazing last year. Purdue has a huge Greek life. Purdue has a ton of resources and a ton of other clubs. So you get all these people who are like, man, I didn't make, the football team at Wisconsin. And then they come to Purdue not thinking that they want to join a sport, but they realize they're missing out big time. So especially this week, where last week we've done a lot of recruiting. As a coach, my only eye right now is sure look for the big tall people, but then look for the people who are dogs. People who are quiet, put in the work. A lot of loudmouths come on the team. They don't back up their talk with necessarily what scores they're bowling. But right now, our novice class size, our freshman class, is about 100 athletes. And we're going to shed a bit, but we're making sure that the athletes that stick around aren't necessarily just tall and muscular, but they're the people who are showing up day in, day out. I say jump, they say how high. It's more about the work ethic versus just raw size.
You mentioned some things right there. You said you're looking for people that have better work ethic. You'll see that when they're working out, obviously, with their habits. Are you able to give any methods for gauging that before you start any of that? Or does everybody consider they're on the team for a minute and you kind of just weed each other out? Or do you guys there's a tryout, you guys going to hop on the erg and row? And if I'm rowing for 2K and I'm rowing 10 minutes, you're going to be like, hey, buddy, see you around, There's some obvious metrics right there, right? Or if I'm only 5'4".
Yeah.
But from the get-go, I was just curious when you said you want to see people with work ethic. Any way you guys measure that other than what you see after this initial period?
Yeah. So one of the ways, it's funny, I think Ian will get a kick out of this. We've been on campus this entire time with our tent set up, with our rowing machines set up, and we just set it up for 100 meters. And the challenge to the incoming freshmen, get on the leaderboard, pull a fast 100-meter time, and a lot of the times they'll pop off and they're huffing and puffing, but they're smiling, and they're like, "That was fun." Mm-hmm. Ian knows in the winter it's not fun. So for me, like you raise a valid point of just hopping on the erg for 10 minutes. If I were to do that today with zero prompts, a lot of people are going to be like, this is what rowing is. This sucks. I think it's more about, from the coaching standpoint, you have your training plan and you have a percentage of volume. You have to hit a certain heart rate to make sure you're on track. Because I know that we're going to row, our big college race in the fall this year is going to be Head of the Bald Eagle, because we take our freshman eights and we go up against Wisconsin, which is a varsity program. For the past 2 years, we've beat them, which never happens, and it shouldn't happen. But we beat them in the first eight, the second eight, and then the fours too. So for me, the question is how do we increase the workload over time, so it's not just catering to the athlete's feeling of rowing is supposed to be fun. How do we ramp up the workload so that they can kind of start to tell that this is going to be hard? So a lot of things that I did back at a small club, I try to do here in that aspect. The challenges of being the head coach of a small club and being just a freshman coach are kind of similar in the sense that at the small club, you want to show retention. You want to show them that this is a worthwhile thing. The same way with the freshmen. And so what I did at that small club was there would be some metrics that don't necessarily even apply to rowing. I was just trying to show them that they're being the best version of themselves as an athlete. We used to do a mile test. We don't run in rowing. We don't use those muscles in rowing. But I would always make them go for a run, a warm-up run. Some practice would just be long runs, make them erg. There would be some strength metrics, tied behind the weightlifting regime that they had. But at the end of a month period, I'd be able to show them that they've progressed. So likewise, right now, trying to find that work ethic in this incoming class of rowers, there's going to be a huge sample of activities, workouts that we do. They're going to be scaled down, watered down. But there's going to be instruction today of how to pull an oar, because believe it or not, when you're on a rowing machine, there's plenty of ways you can mess up the rowing motion, and it's just a simple motion. It's the oar's in the water and it becomes a lever, and you just have to get your weight behind it. And so, breaking it down, because a lot of these athletes are going to be coming in with their own notions of what rowing is. They've probably all watched Boys in the Boat. They're like, oh yeah, it's all about your biceps and your upper body. So you have to break it apart piecemeal, slowly. And for the majority of them, aside from the experienced rowers, they're probably going to walk away from day one doing maybe 30 minutes max of, zone two training. But they're going to be sore tomorrow. Sure. So just steadily ramping things up, throwing a 2-minute, we're going to hop on the rowing machine for 2 minutes. We're going to try to all row together at the same time. And it's going to be a pretty low stroke rating. But, this is kind of one of the stepping stones to here's how the sport kind of all comes together. And then when you gradually start ramping that workload up, seeing who keeps on coming back to practice, who keeps on buying in.
Gotcha. Since we at the gym we have several erg machines in the CrossFit world. There's plenty of rowing on the erg machines, and Jen, I can't remember her last name. Anyways, Jen rowed for the Olympics, and
Jen Floyd.
That's right. She rowed for the Olympics, and she was at CrossFit Naptown. One it was called Naptown, and that's where I started my CrossFit experience. So she taught me, how to row, and she went all the way to Olympics, having just walked on it at East Coast College, and then figured things out from there. So when I opened my gym, at my lightest, I probably weighed maybe 240. I'm 6'3", and I was about 38 years old. And I sit down for this 2K row test. I'm like, oh God, this is not going to be fun. And it was everything I could to row a 6:59. I wanted to break 7 minutes, And I'm even wearing like Olympic weightlifting shoes with those elevated heels to give myself like an extra inch on the pull. And I'm holding that oar in my fingertips. It's not even in the palm of my hand. And I'm just trying to row like 25 strokes per minute and maintain that 27. And then those last several hundred, maybe last 400 meters, I'm probably like 28, 30, 32 strokes a minute. And you get up there and you think your heart is coming out your eyeball. And I'm like, this is not for me at my age and my size. I'm not built for this. But so just from a number standpoint, what's the difference between a varsity male and a varsity female on a 2K row test on average, middle of the bell curve? I
think it's about 30 to 45 seconds.
Oh, wow.
If we're talking about like Division I teams like Texas, Indiana, on the NCAA side, it's about 30 to 45 seconds behind what their counterparts on the IRA side are.
Gotcha. All right. Now, Ian, you said you played other sports other than rowing, and then you just finished your freshman year, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm sophomore now.
And they have the 8s and the 4s. A number of people in the both of those are paying attention at home. What boat do you row in?
I rowed in the 8-man boat.
So faster, a lot harder to coordinate things, right? What separates people? Hey, this would be a good guy for 4s. This would be a good guy for 8s. Do they have 2s and 1s?
Yeah.
So what is a good separator for those different kinds of boats? What are you guys looking for in terms of teammate, athlete, etc.?
As far as an 8-man boat, because I strictly coach stuck me in the 8-man boat. I think I went on the 4s maybe 3 or 4 times. And the 8s was what, as far as I've learned about rowing so far, 8 is like the competitive, and that's what everybody wants to watch and that type of stuff. So when I'm looking at my teammates in the 8 and my teammates in a 4, I don't want to say that people in the 8-man boat are a bit more competitive, but I do want to say that people in the 8-man boat are a little bit more competitive.
Right.
Because it takes that much more coordination and teamwork to put every single one of those people together. I mean, you from the guy in the 8th seat to the guy in the 1st seat, you all have to be synchronized perfectly. And for that to happen, you all have to be on the exact same wavelength. You all have to be on the exact same timing. You have to be in the exact same mind state. So to put that all together, you have to have 8 guys who are willing to go the edge of the earth and back. And that's what makes the 8-man so hard. And that's the type of people you're looking for, is those guys who are willing to put in the work and willing to grind out every single second for the guy behind him and next to him.
So there's more variability, obviously. Someone's off a little bit on the 4-man boat, right? The other 3 are. It's not that. It's easier to keep 4 together than it is to keep 8 together versus keep 16 together, right?
It's the other way around, actually. So
really?
I was just letting Ian dig a hole there so I could have 2 teammates in the 4s.
I mean, that's the whole thing, is I've only had 1 year of rowing, so that's how my perspective was. Yeah. But 100%.
So rowing is an interesting sport in the sense of you can almost put it in. Back when I was a more novice coach, I would split it into two different parts: deadlifting and ballet. But in actuality, it's a ballet about deadlifting, specifically because if you just close your eyes and you pull one stroke on the erg, right, that just impacts you individually. And if you're on the erg, you're on a very static position. Whereas in the boat, if you look at all these boats when they're up in racks and stuff like that, all these boats similar to F1, the parts are made out of aluminum, carbon fiber. The holes under the boat, they're almost tic-tac shaped, right? So whereas a kayak is more flat bottom, if you're out like on the river, it's going to be stable. But if you're just in this 8 shell, right, it's going to want to flip to one side. It's a lot like a bike. So this first week of rowing practice, it's about how to get on a bike. It's the same way that you teach a kid how to ride a bike. And the more power you put, when you pick up the bike, you get on it, and you're going at 1 mile an hour, of course, you're going to be like flopping around like that. But the more power you put behind it, you're going to just go zooming in a straight line because the bike just wants to go straight with that power. So these 8-man boats, they have 8 oars. They have a lot of horsepower. They cover a lot of surface area. So the faster you go in it, the less that an individual technique mistake is going to impact the boat because the boat's already going pretty fast. Now, when you start working down, when you go into a 4, now you have 4 oars. And now instead of having 8 rowers and all that horsepower, now you just have 4 rowers. So the moment that somebody's technique is off in a 4, everybody feels it a lot more in the 8. I used to call out Ian specifically and tell him he's hiding in the boat, meaning, everybody around him is rowing really well, and his technique is lacking just a little bit, but he doesn't feel it because everybody else is doing a great job of getting the boat going, and he doesn't feel the immediate impact. Now, there is a funny, picture and video of Ian and one of his teammates, because he didn't go into the 4s, but he went into a pair one time, and the pair is just 1 oar on this side, 1 oar on this side. And the moment somebody does a slightly different thing,
it turns.
The boat's going to flop. So I have a very funny picture of Ian where he's almost falling out of the boat just like that because he's starting to conceptualize like how important it is that everybody does the same thing at the same time. So the people in the 4s, how I stack things up at Purdue is, the 8s, when it comes to like a national championship or Southern IRAs, Purdue has won the team points trophy for the past 24 years, 26, 25. It's a really long time. But in order to get that points trophy, the first 8 entry on the novice man's team, let's say it's assigned 200 points. Then the second 8 is going to be 180 points. Then the heavy 4 is going to be like 120 points. The 4 is just ranked less than the second novice 8. So we put the top 8 fastest rowers in the first boat, the next 8, then in the 4s, it's whoever is in that third 8. We mix it around so that we have a heavy 4 and a light 4. And then if we have the depth to field a 4th 8, it's down there. So Ian he's one of the top 8 ergs from that freshman team. So he never had to go down into the 4s.
You guys, just other numbers I had written some questions. Do you guys use those Concept 2 ergs?
Yeah, they're pretty great. We branched out into using the bike ergs too.
Gotcha. We just picked up new bikes, but not the Concept 2 ones. We've been went with Rogue's Echo bikes. And then like a 500-meter test. That's more of a sprint, right? For our guys at the gym, we've had a few that can break 130. We have one that was like 117, 119. This is in the history of my gym, right? And I think for the females, we had a lady that pulled into 130s. But for you guys, what are numbers like there?
Ooh, so we've had guys on the freshman side go 118. 118, 119 would be like that top novice 8. we never really do those 500-meter when we're organizing like a workout per
Sure.
se. We train according to like number of minutes at this heart rate. We do a lot of heart rate based training, and so for a 500-meter test,
It's not
that's
long enough.
roughly 2 minutes of hard
Sure.
work, however you shake it. So like a typical erg workout, if we're doing, TR1, TR2 would be, I think, 8 by 500. And so a lot of the guys, when they're going to practice, they're holding, a designated split for those 500 meters each time with like time and a half rest. So it's I'd be curious. Maybe that's what I do today. Just have everybody do a 500-meter back to you.
That's death. The first day.
You got to learn the sport eventually.
We can record that and then send it my way. I'd be interested in seeing it.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure the coxswain, when they're calling out cues and directions, they calling out strokes per minute also.
Yeah.
And so the athlete has to kind of know what that feels like mentally. Like if you're a runner, you got to know the difference between an 8-minute mile and a 6-minute mile. If you're, if you have that experience or something along those lines. So the athlete's got to have to kind of know what that feels like, and then coxswain has to call that stroke count out, right?
Yeah. So the coxswain, for a lot of people always say, "Oh, do coxswains always just say row, 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 row?" The coxswain is a leader in the boat, and when we get to a race, we'll have practice the exact race weeks prior to it. For myself, I think, Ian, when he came back from spring break, we would always overtrain a little bit. So if the race is 2,000 meters, we would do 2,100 meters instead, just to kind of make the stroke rate feel more natural. We would do 2,100 meters, or we would do like 12 by 1 minutes where we're 2 beats over. So Ian's boat at the national championship, they were basing, meaning they're the middle 1,500 of the race, they were hitting 36 strokes a minute. But in the weeks prior to that, we would practice 1 minute at a 38. Just so that when they come back down to that 36, it feels, in control. But the coxswain, their role, on the other hand, is up from day one today all the way through the end of the season. They are essentially trying to take my job. So they learn as much of the stroke as possible from their perspective. They don't get to see it from my angle, where I'm riding in a John boat alongside and just watching all the rowers. We do a lot of, in-depth film analysis where we slow the frames down so that we can see the body mechanics behind everything. We can see the reaction of the oar entering the water, and we can dissect where we're going wrong. But the coxswain is, sitting, looking at essentially somebody else. They can only just see the oars going. So from right when the race starts, they're not saying row, row, row. The athletes have it already kind of muscle memory of this is what, this stroke rating feels. The 2,000 meter race is a unique sport because it's the only sport, to my knowledge, that it starts off with a sprint and it ends with a sprint. So you're going from a dead stop and you're taking some short strokes at first just to get the boat moving a little bit. It's kind of like moving a tire. You can't just start slapping the tire as hard as you can. You kind of have to move it along, push it along. And then you go into a high 20 where you're hitting 52 strokes a minute, 54 strokes a minute. And then you have to drop it back down to what your base pace is. So the rowers know what the game plan is, the coxswain. If they deviate from the game plan or something looks wrong, they have a piece of equipment which says, hey, we're hitting a 48 stroke per minute off the start. We need to shift up, we need to shift down. Eventually, when that shift down does happen, they're going to say, in 2, we're going to shift down to a 36, ready, go. But then they hold the team accountable to their race plan. And with how our coxswains race, I tell them that we're not even looking at other boats for the first 1,000 meters of the race. At the 1,000 meter mark, the coxswains, they look up, they take a look around, they say who's there. The rowers like Ian are very heads focused straight forward, focusing on what they can do. Because if they're looking out at another boat and they're getting frantic that there's somebody next to them, they can't do anything to slow that boat down. You can do you can stick to the game plan, stick to the training that we've worked so hard on to make your boat faster. So the first 1,000 meters of the race, the coxswain is just holding you accountable to the game plan. There's a little split, so kind of like how on a Concept 2 it says what your 500-meter split is. They have a piece of equipment in the boat that says we're pulling a 128 right now, blah, blah, blah. And they're able to, talk about technique. They're able to say, inspirational words in the boat. They drive kind of the energy of the boat. And then at the 1,000-meter mark, they look up, they say, hey, we're, 2 seats up on UCLA. We're 1 seat behind on Michigan. For the next 10 strokes, let's really focus on, this part of the stroke. And it takes a very experienced coxswain to be like, oh, we're not getting enough arm squeezing on the back end of the stroke when you pull the oar into your chest. Over the next 10 strokes, make it your forte, So the coxswain's really not focusing on just stroke rate alone. They have to manage the real estate we have left in the race. Right. They have to know if something's going wrong, if they're not hitting their potential. They have to keep them at full speed. They have to pull the focus inside of the boat. So in reality, the coxswain is an entirely, I always market it as the coxswain is a leader. The coxswain is somebody that should be just full of themselves at the end of the season and be like, I got this. I know exactly how this technique should look. The goal that I have for all my coxswains is, I want to have one practice where I just say, this is the workout on the water. And I don't want to say a single thing through my megaphone. You guys run the pieces together. You guys talk to each other. And then you guys dissect the technique. You guys say if it was good or bad. You guys work on it. Because if I have to say something this late in the season, something's up, kind of.
The clearly team sport in a lot of ways. And the coxswains all season long in practice and in competition, they're just synthesizing all this data of what they're watching, each person, and they're looking for all these little things to make some adjustments to increase power and efficiency. And so by the end, they can say, hey, this person is off by a little bit, or like you said, they're not driving through their legs, or they're that arm squeeze at the end to get more and more RPMs out of things. There's a moment, though, in all sports, and there's variability in sports, so it could be a little windy, right? That's some bad weather. It could be really hot out. It could be colder. And there's a moment where you're nearing the end in the 2,000 meters. Let's say it's the last 500, the last 400, 300. And it's just back and forth, back and forth. And there's a point a little bit before then, leading up to it, where the coach or the coxswain has to ask for more pain, right? We agreed on this stroke count. This is the plan. We're close to winning. We're close to being on the podium. So now you have to ask for more. And then the athlete has to decide, do they respond? How do they respond? Do they give or not? Right? And that's the artwork. The data is in their head and all, and they can see what's going on. But then they have to ask for that. What's that like for those leaders in the boat? They're asking for everybody to be in pain. And then they have to go and do it. And you see them at the end, man. They don't know their names. Those people, they don't know where they're at, right? So what's that like, and how do they build that confidence and knowledge and ability to do that?
I think part of that is, so if you're in a boat for a while, you obviously become, you become good friends with everybody in the boat, very connected, and it's no different from the rowers, and then with the coxswains. So by the end of towards the end of the season, the coxswain should know every single person in their boat, kind of personally. And so I remember at the end of ACRAs, we have 500 meters left. OCC had kind of like they were winning the race originally. They had through the 1,000-meter mark, they were ahead of us, I think, by a few seats. Everyone in the boat, huffing and puffing, we're starting to die, but I just remember the last 500 meters, our coxswain had, and I'm ignoring everything at this point. I'm kind of in a zone. I'm dead. I don't remember my name. I don't know where I'm at. I'm just doing the same stroke as the person in front of me. And I remember my coxswain had said something. It was for the second novice 8. She had previously during the race, the second novice 8 was disrespected, and the coxswain knew how to invoke an emotion out of us, how to invoke the anger of the disrespect from our teammates. And she knows what kind of would bring that last inch out of us, the last inch of effort. And for her, she knows what would bring us across that finish line in first place and what she can do to kind of ask more.
That's hard, right? You have to know what buttons to push. There's some people in the gym where I'll just say, hey, Sarah, this is what Arian did today. And Sarah's like, got it, I'm going to smash her, right? I can go to Arian and Arian's lifting, and I'm like, hey, I think we're good here. We'll just add another 5 pounds on each side. She's like, you think so? I'm like, yeah, I got it. You got it. I wouldn't say if you didn't have it. And she was okay, if you say so, then I'll do it. So there's different egos, there's different mentalities, there's different psyches. So the whole role of the psychologist in that leadership position is real, right? And it's hard, and it's a gamble, right? And because then people are wrong, right? When you're trying to motivate or reach somebody or connect with somebody in a moment under duress, a lot on the line, right? So it's super hard. It's super hard. That's probably one of my favorite part in coaching and sports is watching that dynamic play out and watch people win. Starting off though, like, but you're going from 0 to 100 with these kids, and literally with 100 kids. People have been playing soccer years, club football years, wrestling years, even band years, and they show up on campus and are like, "What do you want me to do? Like, we going out there? Like, where's the music? We're on a boat. Is there a party? Right?" And that's not the case. How do you I've seen people mess up putting the boat in the water and things break, right? That's costly all the time, right? That's costly. How do you go from 0 to 100 with these kids that don't know what they're doing? That they're paying attention, they're trying hard, they're athletic, but still, man, they're 18-year-old kids, right? How do you manage that process and then build a winner all in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months?
Yeah. So it's a lot. It touches a lot with, what we were talking about before the podcast. I think a lot of it is messaging. For a lot of these kids, the experienced rowers, they're coming off of rowing for their club for 4 years, and they have this previous concept of, like my 8 did this at, this race. Therefore, from day one, we should be just as good, and then for a lot of other people, Ian, he's a hammer that needs a nail. And so he's looking for some way to measure his success almost immediately. There is a pretty legendary coach out there, Steve Gladstone, and he said, it's a lot of messaging. And you look at, Ian and I think after his last race, when we took a picture with like the trophy and the medal, and before they were going off, we didn't have a boat meeting. A boat meeting is, after you do a practice, you come together as a coach and athletes and you talk about how everything went. When you win, you don't need a boat meeting, but when you lose, the coach needs to be there to pick up the pieces. Because when you win, I'm pretty sure Ian was there and was just like, yeah, I knew we would do it. It was totally all us. If somebody wasn't there, curating the training plan and helping them out every step of the way. So you take a look at like just messaging on that level of knowing kind of how the freshman team kind of works, and you realize that they're all just a bunch of 18-year-old boys coming from their high school championships, their ways of success, and you need to kind of break some of those habits and show them you're doing a new sport. You're doing something completely brand new, and I'm over the top about, hey, today at practice, you might take one great stroke and then 499 horrible strokes, but that's a win. And there might be days down the road where you don't take a solid stroke, but you were at practice and you're giving it 100%. So you learned how to do something wrong. I was riding Ian for a very long time in the spring because his stroke, I forget what aspect of it, his blade wasn't entering the water at just the right time. He was hanging his blade, meaning, everybody else was they were backing their blades into the water, and Ian was kind of going up and then scooping the blade into the water. And, there were practices where Ian's like, I get it. I totally get it. I'm like, great, let's see it tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes along, he's like, I don't get it. So with all these like freshman boys are coming from so many different areas that you almost have to teach them how to be on a team again. And it's okay to fall down. You will fall down, but the optional part is getting back up. We fast forward a little bit from here to, the winter time, and you get people who are dealing with first time issues that they never knew that they were going to have to tackle. For a lot of these guys, it's going to be the first time that they're away from home for 3 months and they get homesick. And when they get homesick, they get sad, they get depressed, and they don't know how to reach out to their teammates. And vice versa, the teammates don't know how to reach out to that person they haven't seen at practice for a while. So a lot of coaching, a lot of rowing coaching, it's 30% actual technical work and then 70% all the other things that fall under the umbrella of sports. So going from 0 to 100, you meet guys like Ian who they just need to see a nail. You point out, hey, you take one good stroke today, but you give it your best, hit it as hard as you can. And then eventually that evolves into, hey, we're going to do, a 30-minute steady state row where we're just rowing along in an 18. Hit that nail on the head. And then sometimes, that the first time we do that row, people are going to come off the boat and they're going to be like, that was amazing. That was the best row ever. And as a coach, you're like, great. You guys did make a lot of mistakes, but you guys have a lot of improvement. Stay hungry, earn your bed. But then sometimes they come off the water, and especially, as we come off the water late in the season, you'll get people like in the first knob state like Ian was, will they have a great practice? But then the first practice they have where it's, okay, they're going to be like, that was the worst practice ever. No, it wasn't. Like, 4 weeks ago, you guys were rowing so much worse than this, and you guys were claiming that that was your best. So going from 0 to 100, it's a lot of getting into the mentality of the student athlete and trying to view things from their perspective. And, Purdue's a pretty unique opportunity where I'm the head coach, but then we have assistant coaches, and I tell them, here's what to look for. Don't necessarily look for the rowing stroke. Look at the athlete and how engaged they are, and see how you can kind of twist it a little bit so that you can get them more engaged, especially with addressing large numbers. There are so many different learning styles. So some people, they need to get their hands on it and actually experiment it with a little bit. Some other people need it explained differently. Some other people need to see it, right? So it's not about a one-stop shop of this is how we're going to coach. It's like we have to keep on pivoting, have to keep on maneuvering around the athletes, see how many athletes we can keep engaged practice to practice. And eventually you can kind of let the freshman team be freshman boys and be like, hey, we're going to go do this insane workout on the water. They'll all be happy about it, and they'll get the idea of, by the fourth or fifth piece, it was trash and blah, 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 blah. And I'll say, yep, but at least you guys are doing these pieces, and that's exactly what the varsity is doing. So going from 0 to 100, it's not necessarily about, teaching the rowing stroke perfectly. More so it's about being there for the athlete and seeing it through their lens and trying to kind of maneuver with them. And, one of the things that I have to deal with is we have 100 athletes right now, but you have to fall in love with the sport first. And I don't want to force somebody to be on the team if they hate the sport. So after these first 3 weeks, these first 3 weeks are just teaching the stroke, learning how to row, giving them a variety of exercises that we're going to do. And at the end of it, we're going to have our signing day where we're like, okay, you're signing this piece of paper to be on the team, to get all the merch. But, the workouts that we did prior to this, those are going to look like baby workouts compared to what's coming on. The job doesn't stop there. It's just constantly, showing how the goalpost keeps on creeping back, creeping back, creeping back. What was good today, what was an A today, is a B tomorrow. And then by next week, it's a failing grade. So going from 0 to 100, it's an absolute ride from my perspective. And through the eyes of Ian, it has to be even more intriguing because coming on from, I think I remember Ian's first day, he was just so happy to like be on the team. And he was rowing horrendously, but he was rowing strong, and being able to kind of like work with Ian. I'm pretty sure Ian will tell you like he didn't know anything about rowing. He thought he knew something about rowing, but as it kind of progressed, he's like, I absolutely knew nothing. But thankfully, we had the coaching staff. We had a clear messaging. We had clear messaging to kind of help athletes pick themselves up off the floor, understand that they're going to make plenty of mistakes, and to not beat themselves up.
It's kind of funny. I did CrossFit for many years, and as you mentioned before, CrossFit has the rowing, the erg machines, and that's how I got onto the team. Is because I had always been like, oh, like I can sit on the erg machine and I can do a couple 100-meter sprint and do my workout at CrossFit. So I came into rowing here at Purdue, sort of confident, I would guess. And then a couple days in the water, it breaks down. You realize how much you don't know, but I still absolutely loved it. And that's all the credit towards Coach. Is it was so hard to at first it was easy to see the progress, but later in the season he mentioned when that goalpost moved back and last week was great, this week it needs to get better. Sometimes it was really hard to see that while and I knew what I would need to fix. I knew what I needed to fix. Coach mentioned my blade wasn't entering the water at the precise time as somebody in front of me behind me. And I knew what I needed to fix. I knew how to fix it. He had explained it, but it just took me a while to get to that goalpost. And that's what all credit to Coach is. He has the ability to take me from somebody who didn't know how to row from the zero to somebody who's willing to put in he got me to the point where I'm willing to put in weeks of effort just to fix that one small technique change, and that 100% committed to the team. And that's what Coach did so great.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, like, if you were to have asked me this question, 4 years ago when I was still on a head coach of a small team, it would have been a different answer, but it would have been an answer more metric based. And I think that separates like the great coaches from okay coaches. It's not all about, results now. I've been on coaching staffs where, you have 4 weeks to get ready for the first regatta, and then they judge you based on how well your boats do, like immediately. And instead of seeing the forest for the trees and seeing the journey for what it is, they want results now. And then people learn how to row the wrong way, and they don't actually understand what the sport's about. But then the great coaches are just like, it's worth, trying to do. For example, the blade work that Ian was talking about, that revolves around the catch of the blade. So putting the blade in the water. And we'll have days where this practice is going to be about this part of the stroke, this part of the stroke, this part of the stroke. So when an athlete's not getting it, you have to have a coach that is okay with just saying, you know what, this is worthwhile. Let's redo this exercise. This athlete's not getting it. He's not a total wash. Let's keep pressing, So that's where like a lot of coaches kind of don't maneuver. Like I said, they're not moldable, but they're not willing to bend. They're just very stiff with how the training plan has to be. They just don't flow with everything.
That's the art. I could say a cue, and if the athlete doesn't hear it, see it, or feel it, he can't really put it into action. So someone else might come along and say a different cue and gets the athlete to perform. Or often cases, it might, with that athlete, it might be just a whole different coach that says the exact same cue that I said, but in a different way. or maybe he likes that coach better. In my personal instance, maybe my kids want another coach in the gym other than their dad. So they'll say the exact same thing that I said, and then they'll start performing. That's like, well, shit, man, I just told you that. A couple other things, like when you have these people going from 0 to 100 in your sport, or if I have soccer moms and soccer dads that come to the gym to the sport of CrossFit or just the sport of being healthy, it's all brand new. One of our core values is enjoyment. And people ask me about that. Like I said, well, if you really hate what you're doing, it doesn't matter if it's great for you. You're not going to continue it because it's not sustainable. So when you're asking these people to be in discomfort, they have to actually like it a little bit, or even love it even better, because that makes it sustainable. Then you got someone also who, like Ian, is hard charger driven. Then there's that knowledge component, like Caleb, you and I were talking about before the podcast started. The 3 things for the head and for the body for the athlete: disciplined and driven, physically capable. But if you have no knowledge of the sport, you might be sinking the boat versus like pushing it along. But to your point, also, my favorite part in the gym is when, like you said, by the end of the season, the coxswain can just run the whole show, or the athletes can handle a really painful workout is handled. But at first, they're starting off with, can I do this? And then same thing with adults that come into the CrossFit gym, they're like, hey, can I do this? Or any other sport, can I? And then they start to develop some knowledge, some abilities, and they start having these reps, which leads to their confidence. So they keep having these mental PRs, these confidence PRs. So people used to be really nervous. Oh man, what are we doing today? What's on the board? What's the program? What's the workout? Shit. Oh my, I don't know. I'm worried. After a while, that fear's just gone. They look at it, they read it, and nod their head, and they're trying to think, how do I attack? How do I get through this? And that evolution is huge as an athlete. But as a person, you realize, hey, I handled this learning curve, this painful experience, this painful conversation with my coach, with my spouse, with my coworker, and handled it okay. I could probably do the same thing next time in the sport or in life. So start applying those things. They have these mental PRs, and they just transfer over and over and over again. I had a question about training. Is it really just height and endurance, or how much you guys look at power as well? Because power is force times velocity, right? Work displaced over time. So I got to think big deadlift, big clean, and huge back with big rowing, big single arm row pull-ups. But you still got to be able to do a whole bunch in a row. But if I'm 175 pounds with a 500 deadlift and I'm 175 pounds with a 200 deadlift, the 500 kind of helps, right? How much does that get ingrained with the training? Talk about that piece for a minute here.
Yeah. So kind of bouncing off of what you said earlier, like with the freshman class as a whole, some of them might have picked up a weight beforehand. Some of them come from, they have their own 5-day split, 3-day split, 2-day split, what have you. But one of the, subtasks of a freshman coach is not when, it's develop good habits, for the rest of their lives. So I'm pretty big on giving them a weightlifting plan, even if it's like a simple one that they can do in an hour. So giving that to them earlier on, because a lot of other teams, they do like a full body circuit in the fall, and then they do strength lifting in the winter, and then they transition into endurance lifting in the spring. I'm more about start good habits now. We'll teach you how to lift, and you just keep following this training plan the entire way through. So right now, our training plan is kind of divided into a 2-day split this early on. We hit a lot of the compound exercises, and then we have some accessory muscle stuff. In the rowing motion, you use your legs. The majority of your power comes from the legs, then it comes from your back. And so, every other month, if I see that an athlete's plateauing, I'll switch out one exercise for the other. But the big groups, squat, deadlift, even if it's with a trap bar, and bench. Those are the big 3 that we hit, as well as bent over row and then we kind of transition it. So if somebody's plateauing on something, instead of, back squat, we'll transition it to front squat. And instead of, just a straight, barbell bench, we'll transition it into just regular, or sorry, yeah, instead of just a straight barbell bench, we'll transition it into like a dumbbell bench. And so it's the same exercise, but now the athlete has kind of like a fresh sort of, this is like a totally different exercise. Let me do this, but it's still working out the same muscle group. So we primarily hit the big compound exercises where it's multiple muscle systems working together. And then later in the season, in the spring, we'll gradually introduce some endurance lifts. But this way, the athletes are just getting, big legs, big backs. I throw in bicep curl too, because they're freshman boys. Like, they want to see some form. It goes back to what I was saying with like, oh yeah, we used to do a mile test, and you can see how your mile went from 920 to 840 to 820. Now you guys have some physical features. You're more defined with your biceps, and you're getting bigger because your biceps are getting bigger. But we throw in some accessory lifts, not too much, just big compound lifts with the legs in the back.
Core work too,
Now, correct me if I'm
gotta be hit.
sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, Coach. So coming into the season, I think I weighed around 210 pounds, 215. So for a rower, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the endurance, comparatively speaking, to like Jack Miller, or Owen, who are both swimmers, right?
Right.
And they're tall and lengthy. So, but the one thing I did have was strength. And so, how much of my strength was actually made up for my lack of endurance, I want to say.
Oh, I see. That's a good question. Because this is where I start to get out of my wheelhouse a little bit. But the U2 and U1 stuff, it goes towards, so like 60-minute, 90-minute rows. It goes towards increasing your muscles' ability to do more with the oxygen that is coming through your cardio, the oxygen in your blood, right? So U2 and U1, so you take that from like somebody who's already aerobic, somebody who's come from a very aerobic intense background. They don't have as much muscles to work with, but their muscles can work longer. Whereas you have a lot of muscles, but your muscles aren't used to working that long. So I would say that it almost like equaled out until you were able to up your steady state. You were able to increase your UT and your U1 stuff, because on the flip side of that, we do the training zones that we go by, it's U2, U1, where it's just, going towards lengthening out your muscles' ability to do this motion for longer.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the anaerobic threshold where we're specifically targeting trying to push that threshold higher and higher, where your body turns over from the aerobic to the anaerobic process. And then above the anaerobic threshold, we have TR1 and TR2, which stands for transportation, which does more with how much oxygen-rich blood can your heart pump to keep your muscles kind of supplied. So when it comes from like an aerobic to, in the fall, if we were to have you and Carter sit down and do just a test piece, if we were to have you do a 2K, I think you would have flown and died.
Yeah.
But as you got more steady state in you, it kind of took over.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So it was easier to come from the perspective of I have a lot of muscle, I just need to train the muscle, versus, the process of trying to gain more lean muscle that Carter had to go through.
Okay. That's a big component. It takes a long time to build muscle, right, and build strength. It takes years. You can get in better shape pretty quickly. relative to how long it
Yeah.
takes to build muscle. So if you have that already built in the tank, then all right, we're just gonna make some adjustments. One different thing I
Yeah.
want to get into just real quick before we wrap up here. Have you been through the last amateurs
Oh
to Helen
no, that's on my list for sure.
by
Though.
Mark Durand, the last amateurs to hell and back with the Cambridge boat race crew. So for those that don't know, there's the Olympics, and then for some will say even higher than the Olympics is the boat race, where it's Cambridge versus Oxford, and some of the people on the teams there, those two teams from England, they prefer to win that race even over the Olympics. And I'm not sure if that's still true today, and it's not true with everybody, but that gives you an idea of how important it is, where it spans over a century, well over a century, and it follows Cambridge's team for an entire year, where they had this author at the practices, and Caleb, to your point, talks about the different psyches of the teammates. Someone who's in position 4 or 5 is different than position 1 or 8. There's higher value in some positions than others. Blah blah blah. But it talks about that, and it follows the crew team and what they go through. So if you haven't checked it out yet, it's a good one. Along those lines, when you guys are training, if you're training by yourself, Corey, if you're training, not training the team, you're training for you to improve. And then Ian, for you to improve, what do you guys listen to?
Ooh. If I'm training by myself, like let's say there's a practice that I couldn't make because of school, or I'm an ROTC cadet here, I'm making up my workout at the co-rec, and I'm sitting there by myself. Honestly, I think a lot of times I don't really like to listen to anything. More as just kind of you have the screen in front of you and you're kind of more focused. I find that sometimes while the music is great as practice with you're with your teammates, you're in a fun environment. But when I'm by myself, and even like if it's just weightlifting, sometimes I don't even have music. I don't really listen to anything because it keeps me more focused on the task. While I'm at practice, like I know I'm at practice. This is what I'm here to do. So personally, I think I find myself often not listening to anything when I'm by myself.
Gotcha. How about you, Caleb? You listen to anything?
Yeah. It depends on what I'm in the mood for. Like, so lately when I go to the gym, I'm on like a 3-day split myself. If I'm kind of low energy, throw on a pretty good podcast. So the Joe Rogan podcast, listening to some of the people that he brings on, that's pretty cool. Or if I'm in like, oh man, I woke up at 6 o'clock to get my workout in before, going to practice or going to my full-time job, I'll throw on probably some old Kanye, throw it back to the basics.
Gotcha. If you're looking to change things up, listen to a podcast. I know a good one. How about you, Caleb? What's an adventure you haven't done yet, but you want to go and try out? Maybe it's a vacation, maybe it's a spot, maybe it's an activity.
Man, I really want to go hiking somewhere down in West Virginia. Just get a bunch of guys. Because I have a group chat, and you know how it is. We watch one YouTube video about surviving in the wilderness, and we're like, yes, light work, we can do this. So I really want to put, our money where our mouth is and just kind of find some guys, go down, see if we can live off the grid for about 3 days, or if it'll drive us insane and we have to go to like a Walmart in like the first 4 hours.
What I would do first, if you're in West Virginia, go to the New River, and they have plenty of great rafting, and it's now a national park, so you can go rafting for a couple of days, or even do an overnight, and then after that you can just hike out and then just rough it the rest of the way. How about you, Ian? Where would you like to go?
Oh man, big like outdoor activity. That's what I love to do. So recently, I've been falling in love with the idea of like skiing and snowboarding. And we don't really have most amazing skiing and snowboarding out here in the Midwest. So I would love to go somewhere west with a couple of friends. I've been a few times, so and I'm okay at it. So maybe I have a little bit too much overconfidence to think I could go hit a black diamond somewhere somewhere out in the West. But I think that's what I really want to do. Maybe go to Colorado or something like that and just hit the slopes.
What's your favorite sports movie, Ian?
Man, I remember watching The Blind Side when early high school. I watched it with my mom, because I just started playing football, and it kind of, I never used to play sports until freshman year. That's when I just first started out playing sports. I remember seeing that movie, got me motivated, and I think ever since then I just love watching it.
How about you?
I probably watch it at least 4 or 5 times a year.
How about you, Caleb? Favorite sports movie?
Ooh, it's got to be Hoosiers.
Gotcha. How about, Caleb, your favorite sport and athlete?
Ooh, that's a good one. Probably basketball and probably Gordon Hayward.
Okay.
I was a big Butler fan in 2011, 2012. Wow. So seeing him kind of rise the ranks and get out there.
How about you, Ian?
Favorite sport athlete? I don't really watch a lot of sports now that you mention it. I'm one of those people that loves playing
Gotcha.
it. I've done so many throughout my life, but putting the sport on the TV, I just can't do it. Something about watching it doesn't give me the same gratification as doing it in real life.
Gotcha. How about like a favorite book, Ian?
Favorite book? So just recommended to me by my brother. It's a shorter book. I just recently read it about a couple of months ago. It's Make Your Bed. It's pretty popular nowadays. It's about a Navy admiral. He gave a commencement speech.
At Texas. Yep.
Yeah. And it's really inspiring. I love those. It's on the same level as Atomic Habits.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a self-improvement, and ever since I read Make Your Bed, it kind of gave me a new spark,
yep.
I guess.
My daughter just drove down to Alabama to start her 3rd year, and that's one of the books that she listened to. She liked it quite a bit. I've been through that. My wife's been through it. The audio is great because the Admiral, he does the reading to listen to the audio, so he does it himself. So, how about you, Caleb?
It's a book called Going After Casciato by Tim O'Brien. It's a pretty good, I guess, like a mystery book. It's about a platoon in Vietnam, and one of the soldiers goes AWOL, and I won't spoil too much, but it's kind of, did this happen or did it not happen? Was it all a daydream by a Vietnam soldier?
Gotcha. Wow. I bet my wife like that. How about superhero or villain? Caleb? Could be in comics, could be in movies, could be in books, could be in real life.
In real life. Superhero or villain? I don't know. I really liked Samuel L. Jackson's character in Glass. I forget what his name is. Yeah, he was just always one step ahead of everybody, right.
That is a really good movie. I'm not going to lie.
How about you, Ian?
Yeah. I've always been like a superhero guy. I mean, ever since I was a kid, my dad, he had the comics. I read them. Favorite superhero is really hard to say. My dad always got me in the side of Silver Surfer. Just kind of somebody so powerful you couldn't fathom how powerful they were. And so I think ever since I was a kid, I always liked the idea of being so powerful. And I guess
All right. What's your favorite lift, Ian?
Oh, I have to say the squat.
Okay.
Just straight up barbell squat.
I like RDLs. So it's a good lift, and if you're feeling a little bit sore in your lower back, kind of irons it right out.
Nice. Big hamstring, big posterior chain builder. Do you have a favorite quote, Caleb?
Oh man, I think it has to be. I forget who said it. She was an Olympic swimmer this past Olympic cycle, and she said, "Train like you've never won, race like you've never lost."
Awesome. How about you, Ian?
I'm going back to one of my favorite movies, one of the best movies of all time, Shawshank Redemption. Get busy living or get busy dying.
Right. I know we can.
Something to live by.
I know we can find you guys on X at Purdue Crew, on Instagram at Purdue_Crew. The website is PurdueCrew.com. Caleb or Ian, is there any other places you want us to look for you guys? Are you guys good?
I think that's all of it. Honestly, look for us at the next regatta.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, man, great time. Again, I'm a two-time Boilermaker, so I'm a bit biased, but enjoyed what I learned today and the parallels, and I can appreciate the learning curve. And I really have just learned a lot and enjoyed myself. I'm glad I ran into you at the gym, Ian, and then you introduced us to Caleb.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that Purdue had done so well with this club sport that they've been in for so many years, but it still takes what it takes. It takes the mindset and knowledge of your sport, working with teammates, and then how do you train, how do you eat, how do you recover, and all gets dialed in. The more people dial it in together, the better the team's results are, and you guys have great results. So, again, thank you so much for being on. For those that have questions, want to email the show, and email us at info@athlete-builder.com. You can find us on all the social media sites, and be on the lookout for the Athlete Builder book that gets published September 30th this year. It'll be coming out, so be on the lookout for that. So, Caleb and Ian, thanks so much. Great talking to you guys. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us on.